everyone. Welcome to the Sexpert Interview. Today, my guest is Celeste Davis. She and her husband, Rich, run the Marriage Laboratory and Marriage Karaoke podcast, which I gotta say is a really clever podcast. They take love songs that kind of teach a message about love and relationships that isn't quite healthy, and they rewrite the lyrics to be like a more healthy, like good relationship advice, which I think is brilliant and really funny. Anyway, Celeste writes this blog called Marriage Laboratory. Super smart, talks a lot about the little experiments they do in their marriage to strengthen their marriage, and they share their results. She's been married for 12 years, has 4 children, has a master's degree in sociology. And I came across Celeste's blog, and so about 3 years ago, and have talked to her before on what she does. And I think she'd be a great guest to talk about the topic we'll be talking about today. Anyway, Celeste, welcome to today's episode. Um, I'm curious, tell me about your story.
Well, back in 2014, it was really just an experiment. Both my husband Rich and I like to write, and we always kind of talked about starting a blog. Like maybe we'll start a book review blog, or maybe we'll start a cooking blog, or it was like in those kind of days where blogs were just kind of fun and like just like lots of family blogs. And anyway, so we got, I don't know, I guess I got this idea. I was like, what if we did like a marriage experiment blog, like Marriage Laboratory, and we do these love experiments and we talk about what happened and what we did, and then we like interview people. And he was on board. Well, we did it kind of together at first. It kind of then turned more into my project, but the blog at least.
Uh-huh.
Um, so yeah, we just kind of jumped in, didn't know what we were doing. So at first it was a lot of just interviews with people of how they were doing marriage, interview with marriage therapists. And then yeah, we would do like monthly experiments at first and just kind of wrote about it. And then through the years, I've kind of had to own my own expertise at doing all these interviews. And then I got trained by the Gottman Institute. And so kind of owning that, I know stuff now. So
That's great. Well, that's pretty prestigious to be, you know, Gottman certified. And you live in, I think, the Seattle area near where the headquarters is too. I wonder if that made it any easier to.
it did make it easier. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'm a big fan of John Gottman's books. That's great.
Us too.
So, what would you say is like the experiment you did early on that was the most profound of all the experiments?
So 2000, I can't remember if it was 2017 or 2018, but we did a whole year based on Gary Chapman's 5 love languages. So we took 5 months, and every month was dedicated to, gifts, service, physical touch, words of affirmation, or quality time. Um, so we did, like quality time. We took like a few, I don't know, 15 minutes every night after the kids went to bed to just like no screens, no watching things, just connect and talk. Which doesn't sound that revolutionary, but it kind of was because we love to
Right.
just veg and watch shows once the kids go to bed. Um, and words of affirmation, we like texted each other compliments every day. And then we did physical for our physical touch month. We had sex every other day, which maybe that's not revolutionary for you, kind of was for us.
Uh-huh.
And
Which was the
that,
last of the five, right? It was towards the end of the
yeah,
five
it was
experiments.
towards the end. And that one was really surprising because my love language is not physical touch. Actually, when I took the love language quiz online, I got 0 points for physical touch. Like I like my personal space. It's not how I feel love. Every other area had more points than that one. And Rich is only his third, I think. So we weren't really expecting much, but there was something different about that month where we really just connected. And it was like, we were dating again. We were flirty and fun. And he would come home, and instead of, one of us being in a bad mood and the other one of us taking offense to the bad mood, it was just kind of like we like connected, and like it was just magical. And I was like, whoa, what is happening here? This is
Uh-huh.
crazy. For this not being a love language to have such a powerful effect. So that one was probably the most connecting experiment we ever did.
That's great. It's amazing how uh, truly connecting healthy sex can be in a
It is.
marriage, and how much beauty and joy it can really bring. That's great.
Agreed.
So,
Yeah.
I want to talk more about what you've learned through that process. Um, I'd say many, if not most couples, they want to improve their sex life. So they download like an app like Intimately Us, which is a great idea, by the way, or they find a podcast or a blog. Can you talk about like how do people really foster, like, does an app improve their sex life, or is there more steps than that? Like, what's the work required to really improve a person's sex life?
That's a great question. Apps can definitely help. um, yeah, and I get these questions, all the time. And what I've found is that people are so anxious to hear easy answers. Um, but the truth is, if you really want to improve your sex life, you have to dig a little deeper. So, an analogy that I use a lot is that your sex life is like an onion. And the outside, the very crispy outside layer is going to be like, your positions and lingerie and, timing and different like external things that are going on, toys, whatever. And then people really, really, really want that to be the answer because that is easy.
It'd be
So I get
convenient.
questions all the time like, how many minutes do you spend in foreplay? Or how exactly do you orgasm? Or da 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 da. Like really specific, like physical questions. That's like the physical level, is just the outside of what we can see.
Right.
And wouldn't that be so nice if a piece of lingerie could solve all of our sex problems, right?
That'd be great.
But that's not how it works.
No, and that's what the magazines and the grocery checkout counter advertise. That, like, 50 new ways to reach the big O or whatever, right? They're focusing just on that outer onion level
Absolutely.
layer.
And so, so common in this area, like so common. Um, but the truth is, you have to peel back those layers. And if you peel back those layers, you're stuck to get more into the internal work of such an important thing in sex is the ability to be vulnerable. So, how comfortable are you being seen? Not just physically, but emotionally and mentally, and how comfortable are you with your partner being vulnerable. And it's also at the core, I think, of the onion is always our self-worth. Our sense of self-worth is, if it's unstable, if it's unhealthy, what we're going to do is we're going to look to our partner to try to validate us, to try to fill our sense of self-worth. So a lot of people look to sex for that, and so they're always disappointed because your spouse can't fill your self-worth. You have to fill your self-worth. And wouldn't that be nice if our spouse could do that, but they can't. And so it's really that internal work that's the core of the onion. And that's, I mean, my journey too. Like when we first started, I mean, I wasn't even like interested in improving my sex life. I thought it was fine. I wasn't reading books about it. I wasn't thinking much about it at all. And it was on my blog where I just kept getting question after question after question from readers like, what about sex? What about sex? And I'm like, I don't know, not my area of expertise. And this was about in 2016. Yeah. And so I just started interviewing sex therapists and I started reading books, and I read like 6 books, in a really short succession. And it was fascinating to me that every single book seemed to start out with like, don't you skip to the end about the physical tips. Like you have to wade through this whole thing
Uh-huh.
about intimacy and about self-worth and about your brain and about like what's going on with you and what are your insecurities and what are you looking to your partner to validate about you. Like all that stuff. Like don't skip this stuff. This is the meat of it. Like every book said that, every single one. And so I thought it'd be like, oh wow, yeah. And then when I actually got into it and started applying the stuff I was learning, before I started, if somebody had asked me like, what could you do to improve your sex life? I would be like, I don't know, buy some lingerie. I don't know, spice it up, try a new location. I don't know. I would have guessed it was just the physical level. But then when I went through the work and went through all the books and did all the worksheets and I took 2 courses, it was what ended up actually like revolutionizing it for me was the inner work, and was digging into all of my limiting beliefs about sex, about myself, about my marriage, about my partner, and being like, whoa, I had way more work to do than I ever would have thought, because I had tons of limiting beliefs about sex and about purity culture that I was raised in that I needed to work through, and about myself and my body and our marriage and all of this stuff. And that has way more to do with your sex life than your positioning.
Absolutely. That's great. Wow. And that work kind of never ends, does it? There's always more to, you can always get better at that. Like, I
That
have
is
a
true.
really good friend. Um, he, uh, just through our conversations, I can tell his real sense of self isn't centered in him. It's really whether or not his wife is pursuing him sexually or not. And he's so um, fixated on that. Sometimes even his children kind of become like he resents his kids sometimes because they get in the way of his wife being fully available to him and everything like that. So what's your advice for people that are still like they sex is so important to them, they're not getting it like they think they should or whatever, but it's really because they need to do more internal development work. Like what's the first step to like really getting centered within yourself?
Wow, that's a big question. I would say do some reading. I really would recommend Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife's work on this. She has a lot of podcast interviews, and I guess that's not so much reading, but she also has online
Mhm.
courses that deal specifically with this. I had her on my podcast, and I asked her the question, like, I'm getting these, you know, questions from the high desire partner that are so they feel so trapped. Like, what do you do as the high desire partner, because you can't force your spouse into it? That's not the answer. So you're just stuck. Like, do you just accept it? Like, what do you do? She had some great answers of just like, you have to dig down and ask yourself, like, what is it about me that would be hard to live with? Or what is it about me that maybe is unattractive to my spouse? Am I putting that pressure on them? Am I acting sexually entitled? Um, and doing some internal, like, self validation. What am I asking my spouse to validate in me that I can't validate for myself? Is it my self worth? Is it that I'm attractive, or that I need their approval for what? um, and then doing that work to actually make yourself, attractive to your spouse in the way that your spouse wants to be attracted. Right, because it's
Right.
probably not the way you're currently pursuing them. So I would, yeah, start with her work. Dr. David Schnarch is another one that, Dr. Jennifer Finlayson Fife references him a lot, and his book Passionate Marriage will hit on this a lot and is really, really helpful.
That's great. Very good. So really dig deep. You got to first love yourself before you can love someone else. That's
Correct.
great. So do you think that's related to body image issues that a lot of women might experience that kind of inhibit their sexual desire?
Yeah, definitely. I think both men and women have so much cultural pressure, to be attractive, or to be masculine, or to be feminine, that we carry around our whole lives, that we're not even acknowledging or even aware of how much it plays into our sense of self or
Uh-huh.
our self esteem. But I know as a woman, it is so heavy. Like, it goes so deep. The need to be thin and attractive, it is just pounded into you from the time you're a toddler. Like, you just see in movies and your parents and everyone around you, like, the ideal is just there. And the pressure, especially starting in young adolescence, the pressure to get that validation for being attractive, for being popular, for attracting the opposite sex, or whatever. It's just so intense. And we don't leave it in our youth. We carry that ideal with us for the rest of our lives. And it is so heavy, and it needs to be questioned. It needs to be deeply questioned, because it is playing way too much of a role in all of our lives, that I think it just goes way, just really unacknowledged, and you have to dig down really deep. You don't even notice it until you do, like, go outside the mold, maybe, like, like for my pregnancies, there's so much pressure to, like, lose that baby weight and lose it like that. And when you don't, you feel like trash. You're like, what is wrong with me? It is the experience that so many women have, and you feel like who would be attracted to me? And it does affect your sex life, and it's terrible. And it's not because you're broken or you're such a lazy slob. It's because we're dealing with this massive societal pressure that we really have to just look into the eye and be like, hey, you don't own me. You don't own my self worth. I'm not more or less worthy based on the pounds on a scale. Like you have to dig deep and validate yourself in that, which is a ton of work. It's really hard, but it's really important too.
But on the
Yeah.
other end, coming through that, you have more peace with yourself.
Oh, yeah, so worth it. And you kind of have to do that, like move your validation and your approval from external sources to internal sources. And when you can do that, that's a superpower. I mean, that's going to serve you for the rest of your life. Then you're not going to have to hustle. You're not going to have to prove yourself with your productivity or your achievements or your success or your body. And you can really dig down and be like, you know what? I'm going to be okay. Even if I don't get that promotion, even if I don't lose that 20 pounds, like, I'm going to be okay.
That's great.
I'm still lovable. I'm still worthy of love.
Right. Speaking of which, so we kind of have this idea of being sexy, like, and they think of like, I don't know, they think of like they picture in their mind what they think is a model of what sexy is, and then they compare themselves to that model, and they always fall short. Model's
Right.
probably not the right word, but this idea of what sexy is by
Hmm.
define of the culture, whatever they thought. But that doesn't help in your marriage either. So can we build on this and talk about what how do you how, but sexy is within all of us, isn't it?
Right. And sexy is such a social construct. That's what we don't understand. We think the sexy is just like, it's just the way it is. It's just, we can't touch it. It's just you're sexy or you're not. Right. And sexy is this skinny, voluptuous, seductive, woman, for speaking as woman.
Yep.
um, and it's just this thing that we can't change. Well, we can't change that. But sexy is so much more in our brains. We have so much more control over it than we think. So there is this really interesting experiment that they did with rats and lemons. And so what they did was they had rats in separate cages, and then they introduced a female rat and a male rat together to mate. They always put a lemon in the cage with them. So they did this several times. And then what they noticed when they put just a lemon in the cage without a member of the opposite sex, they would still get erections or they would still get turned on. So they learned that to pair the idea of sex and sexiness with lemons. So in our culture, we don't pair lemons with sex. I mean, I don't know,
All
maybe you,
right.
but
That's another
um,
marriage experiment for another month.
yeah. But our lemons in our society have been passed down in a million ways through a million movies and a million commercials and a million books that sexy means skinny, that sexy means pretty, that sexy means young. Um,
Or big breasts or whatever it might
right.
be. Mhm.
There's this ideal that we don't even think to question. And so, yeah, when we don't meet up with that, it really plays into our head that, like, oh, well, I guess I'm not sexy, right? But no, I love teaching women this concept because I want to just create new lemons. And the lemon is you. Like you are sexy and your
Mhm.
personality is sexy. And I love teaching women that whatever they love about themselves, like bring that into the bedroom and that can be sexy. Like I used to think sexy meant that I acted seductive and that I acted sexy and that I looked sexy. And so I have 4 kids, young kids. So for me, I feel voluptuous and seductive like maybe once a year on a good year. Like normally I'm just in my yoga pants with a bun and covered in some kind of bodily fluid from a child. I don't
Peanut
feel like
butter and
seductive, right?
cinnamon.
And so for me to like feel like I have to be sexy in order to have sex, it's so much work and it's really draining. And I feel like I'm pretending to be something that I don't innate that doesn't innately align with my personality. So it feels just ugh, I have to do that. Like I have to pretend to be sexy. Oh my gosh, that sounds so exhausting.
Uh-huh.
So I have to change my lemons, change my idea of sexy in my own brain away from Jessica Rabbit, this ideal, and into me. So maybe I'm not, seductive and whatever, but I am fun. Like I'm a fun person. Like bring me to a party. I'm a great time.
Uh-huh.
So if I can bring that into the bedroom, like we read Sheila Ray Gregoire's 31 Days to Great Sex, and then she has a challenge every day. And I think there's 5 days in a row or 4 days in a row where you do something fun for foreplay. And that was revolutionary to me because I thought we had to be seductive. I thought we had to be sexy to have sex, right? But here we were having stupid like pillow fights. We're like playing bed defenders. We're like trying to push each other off the bed. And
Uh-huh.
Rich is stronger than me, so he has to have his hands behind his back. And we're like laughing, and it's so silly and stupid. But we're like having so much fun, and then we have sex, and it's not, instead of it like this all this pressure to be sexy, we're just having fun. And it was so revolutionary. And I was like, sex can be fun? I thought I had to be sexy. What is that? Nobody told me this.
Right.
And then I was like, what else can sex be? And another huge one for me, again, I don't consider myself that sexy, but I'm really spiritual, and that's a huge part of my personality. And I was very much taught that sexy's over here and spiritual's over here, and you're not the same thing at the same time, right?
Right.
It's
Right.
like the worldly, like you're not Jessica Rabbit and like, some ideal version of a woman
Like
who's very
Mother
spiritual over
Teresa
here.
or whatever. Uh-huh.
Right, right. Like very different in my head, like these boxes that couldn't be at the same time. And so I had to do a lot of work to overcome my thoughts about God and like how he didn't want me to be sexy, and like deconstruct that and parse it out and work through it, and then kind of couple that with like, no, my spiritual side is sexy, and I can bring that to the bedroom, and how sacred, like how special to like bring that side of myself and that spirit and that feeling into the bedroom is very sacred and special to me. And so I was able to do that when I, bring my authenticity into the bedroom. So for you, if you're not spiritual or fun, whatever, maybe you're organized, great, put that in the bedroom. Maybe you're passionate about, I don't know, creativity, put that in there. Like whatever you love most about yourself, bring it into the bedroom and redefine what sexy is for you to be what is most authentically you. That can be sexy.
If you're goofy, bring your goofy self and
Bring
make
it, of
make sexy
course.
goofy about you or
Yeah, and then sex isn't so exhausting when you're having to pretend something that feels inauthentic to you. Like you can be yourself. And even if you're tired that day, fine, be tired. Like let sex be, bring you energy instead of pretending to be something that you're not.
that's great. That's great. That's really powerful. Let's see. So uh, you're telling the story about pillow fights or whatever to make things fun. Like, I think the time my wife and I laughed the absolute hardest is we played minute to win it games, bedroom
Mhm.
edition. And
Nice.
so like one of our challenges, we put on oven mitts and we had we had a timer going, had to unhook the bras, the clasp of like bras in a row in succession, holding up oven mitts. And we laughed so hard. We had like an M&M
Oh, that's
challenge
great.
and like we had like 5 or 6 different challenges. I can't remember a time we laughed so hard and had sex. It was just like it brought so much like it was so fun. Like anyway,
That's the best. That's
yeah,
awesome.
bringing fun. Any other tips that you have on how to make sex more fun or more authentic or more you? Uh, you mean yourself? Kind of bringing that.
I think a lot of it has to do with just like drastically lowering our expectations and then lowering them again and then lowering them again
Uh
and
huh.
then lowering them again.
Right.
Like, I think we come into marriage with so much baggage and so much expectation that our partner's going to fulfill us, that our partner's going to make us feel attractive, that our partner's going to make us feel sexy, that our partner's going to make us feel special. And when that kind of pressure is in the bedroom, it's such a passion killer. And not only for our partner, but for ourselves. We have pressure for our performance. We have constant pressure for orgasm. and for every, intimate encounter to be so sexy and special and connecting and whatever. And it's just not always going to be that, right? So I think just going in with, and especially too with just the performance part of it, like it's so, you can go into it so goal oriented that it feels like a failure if you don't reach orgasm, or if it's not like the most magical thing, then it feels like a failure, and that feels crappy, and that makes you not want to do it again.
Mm.
So if you could just go into it with super open mind, not expecting anything from yourself, from your partner, and just think of it as like an exploration, like let's see what feels good, let's see what's relaxing, let's see what you want, what I want, how we can make this a connecting experience for both of us. Um, Instead of like, oh, it's Thursday, it's sex night, let's kiss until we have like male orgasm, right? Let's
Right.
like broaden your perspective and make it just, the goal is connection. The goal isn't orgasm, right? I would say
That's
that.
great. That's kind of a higher order, isn't it? Higher level.
Yeah.
That's great. Okay. Let's say you're a couple that you go on dates regularly, you have a healthy uh, emotional connection already, sex is already pretty good, like you're in a good spot. What tips or advice do you have for that couple for more like black belt sex, like advanced, like new level, like things to kind of take it to the next level?
Mm, okay, that's a
Like,
great
this
question.
is advice for the good couples, not for the couples that are struggling.
Well, I do think that even if so many couples, when I explain the onion analogy, they're like, oh yeah, no, I'm great, like I have such a high self-esteem, it's fine. They're like, yeah, just give me like the tips, just give me like the sex tips, like what do you like, how do you orgasm, right? And I'm like, no, like you always can improve the core of the onion. Like, so the special part about sex is it is the most intimately you can be seen, and the more willing you are to be seen, the better your sex life will be, because you'll have that emotional maturity. So David Schnarch, again, is such a great resource on this, and he says that that actually, like, the best people think the best sex is over once they're out of their 20s and their bodies aren't as great and they're not as skinny and young and thin and attractive or whatever. But he says that actual good sex is completely based on you being willing to be seen and you being willing to see your partner in like the best eyes possible, and having that very intimate, vulnerable connection where you're not self-conscious and you're not asking your partner to validate you because you can't do it for yourself. And so when you get to that place, that's where sex becomes really magical. And he says that usually doesn't happen until like our 40s, 50s, even 60s. So he has this great quote that he says, like, actually, cellulite and a really amazing sex life are highly correlated.
That's good. Huh.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good news. Um, but anyway, so I would say definitely always be like improving yourself, and a self improvement is going to mean an improvement in the bedroom. If you're feeling passionate in your own life, you're going to have that passion in the bedroom too. And if you're feeling fulfilled, and if you're feeling like you love your life and you love yourself, that's going to correlate, that's going to spill over, right? And if you're feeling drained, if you're feeling really empty, like that's going to correlate as well. And I also would say, just practicality wise, Esther Perel is another great resource for sex in general. But she says that she kind of looks at this question of people, a lot of people in the world think that it's just really like genuinely impossible to have a good sex life and a long term relationship, that the best sex is always when it's new and in the beginning part of a relationship, and it's so exciting and there's all this validation and there's fireworks, and then it just gets boring like the longer your relationship goes. She
Right. That's the myth, or
Right,
that's what people believe. Uh-huh.
right. And she said the
And a
one
lot of
thing they
people
have,
kind of experience that too. It kind of does kind of plateau.
yeah, and it's easy to do. So she says the one thing that that theory has right is that good sex needs novelty. It thrives on newness. And so we do have to put effort into making it new. And that doesn't have to just be new toys or new outfits or new positions. Like it can be like you yourself have a new hobby. Like bring newness into your life, and also make conscious efforts to see your spouse in a new light. it can be extremely attractive to, like, if you're not used to seeing, your spouse at work giving a presentation, like, pop in and be like, oh my gosh, who knew? They're so knowledgeable. Look at them up there on the podium. Wow, that's amazing. I didn't know that. Or if your wife's just used to being with the kids, like, go watch her do a high fitness class and be like, oh my gosh, look at her. Wow. Or read something that she's written, or whatever she does. I don't know. Like, just bring newness, bring a new eyes to your spouse, and bring newness into your life, and bring newness into the bedroom. So good sex lives thrive on novelty.
That's great. That's excellent. That's cool. Well, Celeste, anything else you want to share?
I've given you everything I
I don't believe that. Sure, you got more. Well, thank you so much. If people want to reach out to you or like learn more about your blog or podcast, where's the best way for them to find you?
I am at Marriage Laboratory. My website's marriagelaboratory.com. I don't update that all that often now. I mostly have brought my game to Instagram. So Instagram's the best way to reach me, and follow me there.
Very good. Thanks. We'll catch you again.
Thank you.